The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. 10 years later, in the summer of his 11th birthday, a vault key in Harry Potter's pocket was warm. Not the warmth metal borrowed from proximity, that kind was passive, borrowed and temporary. This warmth had a center, a direction. The warmth of something that had been waiting for one specific morning and understood, finally, that the morning had come. Harry stood in the middle of Diagon Alley, for the first time in his recorded memory, hand curled around the key, saying nothing about the warmth to Hagrid, who walked ahead explaining Gringotts with the same matter-of-fact gravity he had applied to everything since appearing at the Dursleys' door the previous day. He listened with half his attention and spent the rest absorbing. The owl in a cage outside a shop, turning its head with the composed authority of something that had been watching the world for decades and arrived at strong opinions. The smell from an apothecary's open door, sulphurous at the surface and deeper underneath. A girl his age in emerald robes gesturing at a window display with the ease of someone moving through their native country. He was in his native country for the first time. The understanding settled in his chest alongside the warmth of the key. He had been born into this world, taken from it at 13 months old, and kept in a cupboard and told for 10 years that he was nothing in particular. And now he was standing in a street where nobody looked twice at a woman in violet robes or an owl in a cage in a window, and something was happening that was larger than the alley, larger than his birthday, larger than any single thing he could name. He noticed. He said nothing yet. Some things needed to arrive in their own time. Gringotts rose at the alley's end like an institution that had long since stopped concerning itself with impressing anyone. Inside, vaulted marble, goblins at their ledgers, the purposeful atmosphere of a place where significant things happened as routine. The teller assigned to them introduced himself as Griphook. Harry had not expected goblins to give their names. He liked it immediately, the quality of someone who said what they were without waiting to be asked. Griphook verified the vault key with professional thoroughness, then paused. He held it for several seconds longer than the procedure seemed to require. Mr. Potter, not the way most people said that name, weighted with prior relationship and assumption. He said it the way you said something you were verifying. There is a secondary notification on your account, filed in autumn of 1981. He produced a document from below the counter. Not parchment, something older, a material with the look of something that had been waiting for exactly this morning. Conditions of release. The account holder presents in person, at age 11 or older. What does it say? Harry said. It requires your presence in the verification chamber before standard vault access proceeds. Griphook looked at him steadily. There will also be a second party present. What second party? She arrived 9 minutes ago. The verification chamber was one level below the main hall, through an unmarked door and downstairs cut from stone older than the marble above. Plain room at the bottom, a table, 3 chairs, oil lamps burning low, and an atmosphere that said significant things had happened here before, and the significance had stayed. A girl was already seated. She was Harry's age, with brown hair pulled back, and the expression of someone working very hard to appear calm while processing a great deal of information at once. A notebook lay open in front of her. She had been writing in it, and had stopped when the door opened. And now she looked at him with the sharp attention of someone who had been told to expect something, and was measuring expectation against reality. Harry Potter, she said. Yes, he said. Hermione Granger. She gestured at the document beside the notebook. I received a letter this morning, not from Hogwarts, from Gringotts. It said there was a matter pertaining to my magical record requiring in-person verification. That was all it said. She looked at Griphook. I've been reading the preliminary documentation for 9 minutes, and I have several questions. Griphook set a document on the table. In 1981, he said, a magical binding was registered at Gringotts by Lily Potter, née Evans, and an unnamed associate. The binding was registered under the Peverell Covenant framework, an instrument predating the ministry's current authority structure by 4 centuries. He looked at both of them. The binding connected 2 children not yet of magical age. It established conditions and protections that would activate when both children turned 11 and presented at a location capable of verifying the binding's integrity. What does the binding do? Hermione said. Griphook read from the document. The language was old. The content was precise. 2 children, one marked by sacrifice, one marked by knowledge, would be connected through a structure without a single name in modern magical taxonomy. The connection would grant each party awareness of the other's general safety. It would accelerate shared magical learning when they worked together, and this produced a particular stillness in the room. Establish a protective resonance such that a magical attack on one would be absorbed and distributed through the Covenant's structure, reducing lethality in proportion to the binding's strength. Hermione said very quietly, she designed a protection that required 2 people. What? Harry said. Your mother, she knew what was coming that night. She built the sacrifice-based protection, the one everyone knows about. But she also built a secondary system, one that would be useful not just on the night she died, but after. She looked at Griphook. Would the Ministry have permitted this? The Peverell framework predates Ministry authority by approximately 4 centuries. This instrument exists outside their jurisdiction. The Ministry was not informed. Why not? Harry said. The registration indicates that the unnamed associate had concerns about Ministry oversight of the Covenant's conditions. Griphook's expression held professional neutrality that was genuine rather than performed. The concerns are not elaborated. The activation happened while Griphook was still speaking. Not a sound, not light. Something that had been held in readiness for 10 years, recognizing that the waiting was over. Harry felt it first in his chest, a loosening, something like a room opening that had been sealed, and then in his scar, which didn't hurt but registered the moment the way old injury registered change in the air. He looked at Hermione. She had her palm pressed flat against the stone surface. You felt that, she said. Yes, it came from both of us. At the same time, she lifted her hand. Where her palm had rested, the stone held warmth that stone had no business keeping. Griphook was already making notations with the completeness of someone documenting an expected event. The conditions are met. The binding is now fully operational. What does that mean practically? Harry said. You will know when the other is in danger, not in detail. A directional awareness, a wrongness pointing toward the other person. The accelerant effect on shared magical work will develop over time. The protective resonance is already active. He paused. Strength is proportional to the relationship between the bound parties. At present, it is at its minimum. It grows. What makes it grow? Hermione said. Knowing each other, working together. The binding is not external to the parties. It is constituted by them. What you become is what it becomes. Hermione looked at the document for a long moment. Then she looked at Harry with the directness that was already, after 15 minutes of acquaintance, her characteristic way of engaging with anything that mattered. I've never had many friends, she said. Neither have I, he said. I'm told I'm difficult. Too much. Too direct. She gestured at the notebook. I'm told I'm strange, by my aunt and uncle mainly, by everyone who's ever met them honestly, he said. She was quiet for a moment. You've been living with muggles who don't know you're magical, your whole life. Yes, that sounds very lonely, she said. It was. I think it's over now, he said. Griphook produced 2 rings and set them side by side on the table. Plain bands in old silver, each set with a stone the color of deep water. Registered artifacts under the Covenant, he said. Crafted by the unnamed associate, intended for the bound parties on the date of activation. They are physical registers of the binding's current state. Their warmth reflects its strength. If one were lost or destroyed, the binding would persist, but the register would be gone. Harry picked up the ring on his side. It was warm, not the inexplicable warmth of the vault key, but something more specific. The warmth of a thing that knew what it was for. He put it on. It resized. He watched Hermione put on hers with the careful attention of someone handling something that mattered. She looked at the ring, then at him. This was made for us. Yes. Someone cared enough about our futures to build this before our futures existed. My mother. He paused. And someone else. Griphook produced an envelope, cream paper aged to ivory, sealed with a symbol Harry didn't recognize. 2 curved lines meeting at a central point. If both parties wished to identify the unnamed associate, this letter was to be provided upon activation. It opens only in the presence of both rings, simultaneously. Hermione set her ringed hand beside Harry's on the table. The seal dissolved. Inside, 2 pages, 2 different handwritings. The first was his mother's. He recognized it from letters Sirius had once carefully shown him, kept because they were all that remained of her. The letter said, Harry, If you're reading this, you're 11, you're in Gringotts, and you've met Hermione Granger. Those 3 facts mean more went right than I feared. I don't have much time. The binding I've made is not a replacement for the choices you'll make about each other. It's a foundation. What you build on it is entirely yours. The person who helped me design it knows more about certain kinds of magic than I do. They ask to remain unnamed in the registration for reasons that will make sense in time. Read the second page, then decide what you want to do. I love you. I always will. Mum. He set the page down. Hermione had read hers. She held it carefully, the way you held something that had told you something important. My page is from the unnamed associate, she said. It says the binding will make us capable of things neither of us could achieve alone. Use it for something worth the using. She paused. And then, when you are ready to know who I am, ask Professor Snape. Harry looked at her. She looked at him. The secondary access at Gringotts led not to a vault, but to the Covenant Chamber, a room used when a Peveril Framework Covenant activated and its founding instruments were claimed. Inside, a table, 3 documents in a stack, 2 objects resting on them. The deed identified a property, Thornfield Cottage, Godric's Hollow, and all associated lands and structures under the Covenant's protection, with annexes listed in Schedule A. Hermione read Schedule A and said quietly, "Your mother built a house that is also a legal sanctuary, rooms the Ministry can't see or access." She knew we'd need somewhere safe, Harry said. She knew you'd need somewhere they couldn't reach, but it requires both of us. Everything in the Covenant framework requires both parties. If someone detained you and prevented your access, I would still retain mine, and vice versa. A redundancy system, he said. A very sophisticated one. She looked at the deed. Your mother thought like an engineer, not just building the thing, but building for the thing to fail and accounting for that failure in the design. The legal claim form required both signatures. Hermione read it twice before picking up the quill. "You're going to sign," he said. "I'm reading it first." She set it down. "We've known each other 45 minutes. This is a legally binding instrument committing both of us to a shared structure for an indefinite term, subject to revision only by mutual consent." She met his eyes. "I've been thinking since the verification chamber about whether to claim the Covenant's full legal standing, the deed, the property, everything, or to let the binding simply exist without the formal structure. What did you decide?" "That declining it because we've known each other 45 minutes would be insulting to the care someone put into building it." She picked up the quill. "Also, the way you said it was very lonely tells me that wherever you've been living is not a good situation." "It isn't," he said. "Then we sign." She signed. He signed. The ink was deep water blue, the same shade as the stones in their rings, and it settled onto the page with a permanence that had nothing to do with chemistry. Thornfield Cottage arrived through the flue, with a warmth that was not the warmth of fire. Harry stepped into a sitting room that had been waiting rather than abandoned. Abandoned spaces felt concluded, settled into absence. This room felt expectant, maintained, ready, temperature held, air clear. Through the window the garden was alive with overgrown intention, the foundational plantings intact, growing towards something rather than simply growing. Hermione came through behind him and was silent for 30 seconds, which he was already learning was how she took something seriously. Then, "The maintenance charms are self-sustaining, designed to run indefinitely. Someone thought about this as a long-term instrument, not a temporary arrangement." She had reference copies of all the documents, obtained from Griphook at considerable expense before they left the bank. She consulted the deed as they climbed to the upper floor. Room 3 on the left, a secondary door keyed to the Covenant, invisible until both ringed hands pressed the east wall together. The door opened onto a corridor 3 times the length the cottage's exterior would allow for. 6 rooms, each with a clear function. The library first, shelves organized by principle rather than subject, spanning years of study well beyond where 2 11-year-olds were starting. Not a beginner's collection. Hermione ran her fingers along the spines, pulled a volume, read the first page, went still. Post-Ned WD material. She replaced it, pulled another. And this, someone stocked this library for where we're going, not where we're starting. She turned, and something moved through her expression before she controlled it. Not astonishment, something quieter and more lasting. This took years to build. The practice space had a high ceiling and walls lined with something that absorbed spell impact rather than reflecting it. The choice of someone who expected the space to be used seriously rather than cautiously. The potions room stopped them both. Professional equipment. Temperature regulation independent of external heating. Ingredient storage organized not alphabetically but by function and interaction principle. By what things did to each other when combined, how they changed each other, what became possible through their meeting. Hermione looked at it for a long time. This wasn't designed by someone who teaches potions. This was designed by someone who practices it as a discipline. Someone who found the logic itself beautiful. "Ask Professor Snape," Harry said. "Yes," she said. "I keep thinking that." The fourth room held a journal on a desk, bound in the same material as the Covenant documents, the two-line symbol on its cover. Lily Potter's handwriting on the first page. "If you found this, both of you are here together, which means more went right than I feared. This journal is for both of you. It explains the curriculum I've arranged, the logic behind the library's sequence, the potions room, the practice space. It also explains some things I didn't have space to put in the letter. There is a supplementary section beginning at page 200, written by someone I trust completely, someone who understands what you'll face better than I do in some respects. Read the first 200 pages first, then the supplement. Start at the beginning. Don't skip ahead. This is my one rule." LP Harry looked at Hermione. "Read it aloud?" she said. "Yes," he said. They stayed 6 hours that first day. He read. She wrote, organized, cross-referenced, asked questions at the end of sections rather than interrupting the flow. A rhythm developed within 30 minutes, natural and efficient in the way of something that felt less discovered than recognized, as if they'd been doing this before they were people who could do things. The journal's first section explained the binding's lived mechanics, how the awareness of each other's safety would feel, how to distinguish it from ordinary anxiety, how the accelerant effect would manifest when they focused on the same problem, how the protective resonance differed from standard shielding magic in that it could not be cast around one person alone, but could not be broken by separating one person from the other. Then came a passage Harry read twice before continuing. Lily had written, "I should be honest with you about 2 things. First, the binding carries a trace of Voldemort's magical signature. The night he came for us, the Covenant's soul protection provisions and my sacrifice worked together to prevent a permanent soul fracture from forming in you, Harry. But the rebounding of his curse left a shadow, not a fragment of him lodged inside you, but an impression of abilities he carried, including Parseltongue. You may find you can speak to serpents. This is not his gift. It is a residue of collision, a scar, in its own way, that happens to have a use. Second, there is a prophecy. Professor Snape heard it delivered and brought it to Voldemort before he understood what Voldemort would do with it. He has lived with the weight of that knowledge ever since. The supplement addresses it in full. I want you to hear about it from me first. A prophecy matters only because someone chose to believe it. Voldemort chose you, Harry, because he recognized himself in the description. He saw a threat that looked like him. That choice is what made the prophecy real. What you do with that recognition is entirely yours." Harry sat with those pages for a long moment. Hermione waited. "She knew," he said. "She knew a great deal," Hermione said. "A shadow transfer rather than a soul fracture. That's the mechanism for Parseltongue," she wrote in her notebook, "which means you're not carrying a piece of him. You're carrying the mark of a collision you survived. I'm not a fragment of him," he said. "No," she said, with the precision of someone who had thought it through and arrived at certainty. She made sure of that. She built specifically to prevent it. He looked at the journal. She died anyway. Yes, the sacrifice protection required it. She set down her pen, but she chose the terms. She chose what she prevented. She chose what she left behind. She looked at him. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. August passed in the cottage's hidden rooms. The binding's accelerant effect on shared work exceeded what Lily had projected. Problems they worked on together resolved at a pace neither could have managed alone, not because either was more capable in isolation, but because aligned attention produced something greater than the sum of its components. By late August, they had covered what Lily had estimated would take 4 months. They fell into patterns without discussing them. Harry made tea when Hermione had been reading without moving for more than an hour. Hermione flagged passages he'd need to revisit rather than interrupting mid-flow. When they hit something neither understood, They didn't guess. They went to the shelves and looked until they found the answer, because that was how the curriculum had been designed to work. Every answer generated the next question. Every question had a shelf. On the 6th of August, they sat on the floor of the hidden library and opened the supplement together, sitting on the floor because the chairs had felt somehow insufficient for the occasion. Snape's writing was immediately distinct from Lily's. Spare, deliberate, every sentence doing one thing and not pretending to do two. Where Lily wrote with warmth threaded through the structure, Snape wrote as someone who had made a decision about purpose and adhered to it. The supplement covered what they would face. Not prophecy, analysis. Voldemort's likely trajectory, the Ministry's probable failures, the categories of people who would be useful and those who would be obstacles. And in Section 9 he addressed the prophecy directly. You will hear that the prophecy defines you. It does not. It described you. The child Voldemort chose to fear. A prophecy is a statement. A choice is what gives it power. Voldemort chose you, Harry, because he recognized himself in the language. Someone born to power, capable of being a threat. He made you his enemy. That is his action, not the prophecy's dictation. What you do is yours. In Section 14, the handwriting changed. More careful, each word chosen. Voldemort has attempted soul fragmentation to anchor himself beyond death. I cannot confirm the number of anchors. I can confirm the theoretical framework. He will have used murder to create each one. The soul vessels will need to be identified and destroyed before a permanent resolution is possible. This supplement is designed to receive additions, written in my hand, appearing at the end of this section as I confirm specifics over the years. Do not act on incomplete information. Below the original text, additions in varying ink ages, clearly written years apart, different pressures, different days and different states of certainty. The diary. Tom Riddle's diary. He showed it to me once. I believe it is one such vessel. The ring. Marvolo Gaunt's ring. It is a vessel and carries a killing curse woven into the metal, designed to destroy whoever handles it without understanding what they touch. The stone set in the ring is the Resurrection Stone, the second of the 3 Deathly Hallows. Do not destroy it alongside the vessel. Separate them first. A locket, a cup, a diadem. I believe it is somewhere in the school. The snake. Nagini became a vessel some years ago when Voldemort used a murder to restore himself partially. She carries something that is not hers, and has known it. She is the last. When you reach these pages, I count 5 remaining after the diary. Do not approach them in haste. Approach them in the right order with the right preparation. I will be available when you are ready for the conversation that follows this reading. Hermione turned the last page of the editions and looked at Harry with something rarer than intelligence in her expression. She looked at him with respect. He's been writing this for us for years, she said. He never stopped. Harry looked at the varying ink ages, the careful entries accumulated across a decade, and thought about a man who had agreed to protect 2 children he'd never met and had honored that agreement through every year of their absence. We need to talk to him, Harry said. Not yet, she said. The supplement says to read everything first. We read everything. The Hogwarts Express on the 1st of September carried the particular organized chaos of an annual ritual, familiar to those who had done it before, overwhelming for those who hadn't. Harry had expected the latter experience. He found something closer to the former. Hermione had identified their compartment before they reached the platform, 3rd carriage, optimal positioning, and explained the sociology of express seating without being asked. Ron Weasley appeared in the doorway within 20 minutes, red-haired, freckled, entirely at ease in his own skin, in the way of someone who had grown up in a large, loud family and learned early how to find his place in a room. He looked between them. He looked at the rings. He sat down. Ron Weasley, he said, are you 2 friends? Harry said. Ron received this as complete information and began the work of introduction with the warmth of someone for whom meeting people was a genuinely enjoyable activity. By the time they crossed the Midlands, he had offered his mother sandwiches, described his entire family in roughly chronological order, explained his chess rating, and admitted that his primary ambition was to beat his brothers at something unspecified. Draco Malfoy appeared in the doorway, 2 hours outside London with the bearing of someone whose entrance was itself a statement. He looked at Harry first, then Hermione, then their hands. Those are covenant rings. Hermione, without looking up from her book. Correct. What family? An interesting question. Most people would ask what covenant. The fact that you asked what family suggests you know the Peverell framework. Malfoy's expression shifted a degree. The Peverell framework predates the Sacred 28. Also correct. It's registered under a Peverell covenant. Both parties hold equal standing. The relevant legislation you're thinking of didn't exist when this instrument was created. Blood status as a legal category didn't exist in the 15th century. An 1893 Wizengamot ruling confirmed that pre-ministry instruments aren't subject to retroactive blood status legislation. You'd find the precedent in any comprehensive review of magical contract law. Malfoy stood in the doorway for a moment with the expression of someone whose model of how first year was going to go had just received information it wasn't built to process. He left. Ron, who had watched with the expression of someone who had expected one kind of confrontation and received something entirely different, said, "That was brilliant." "It was accurate," Hermione said. "Can those be the same thing?" Ron said. "They should be more often than they are," she said. Hogwarts appeared across the lake in the dark of early September, lit above its own reflection, and Harry understood immediately what his mother had written in the journal, that the first sight of it from the water felt like recognition rather than discovery, as if the castle had been waiting and was now simply confirming what you'd both somehow already known. Hermione, beside him in the boat, looked at it with an expression he had come to recognize, in just over a month, as her version of encountering something that exceeded expectation. "The books don't capture it," she said. "No." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been wondering whether the binding registers the castle specifically, or whether this is just—" She stopped. "Some things might not need an explanation." "Yes," he said. "Don't tell me I said that," she said. "I won't," he said. Professor McGonagall met the first years in the entrance hall with the efficiency of someone who had run this 40-plus times, and refined it to its essentials. She looked at each student in turn. When she reached Harry, something in her expression did something complex and private. Not just recognition, but memory, and alongside memory, something that looked like it had been kept composed through effort. She looked at his hand, then at Hermione's. She said nothing, but her expression said clearly, "I will have specific questions, and we will have that conversation at a time of my choosing." The Sorting Hat placed Hermione in Gryffindor, after a 5-second pause she later described as more interesting than expected. When Harry sat on the stool and the hat descended, it went entirely still. "Bound," it said, in a voice that wasn't quite sound, "under a Peverell covenant." "I haven't encountered one of those in centuries," Harry thought. "Yes, the other half of your binding is at the Gryffindor table. I can feel the resonance from here, a pause with decades compressed into it. Your mother sat on this stool." She was— Another pause, something in the hat's voice adjacent to emotion without quite being it. She would have been very pleased with what she built. "Gryffindor," the hat announced. Harry sat beside Hermione. She said, very quietly, "What did it say?" "That my mother would have been pleased." She was still for a moment. "That's not nothing," she said. "No," he said. "It's quite a lot, actually." Neville Longbottom, sorted just before Harry settled at the Gryffindor table with the careful posture of someone waiting to be found insufficient. Harry noticed him and thought, with the recognition of someone who had spent 10 years in a cupboard, that he understood that expression entirely. He filed it away as something to address when the moment was right. The great hall's enchanted ceiling showed a clear autumn night, and Harry ate his first Hogwarts dinner, watching candles float overhead, and felt, for the first time in his memory, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. McGonagall requested to see them both the following morning. Her office was organized with the precision of someone who had spent decades making sure students understood that precision and care were indistinguishable from respect. She looked at them across her desk, at the rings specifically, for a long moment before she spoke. "The Peverell framework," she said. "Yes, Professor," Hermione said. "I haven't seen those in active use since—" She stopped herself. Whatever years she had been about to name, she decided against naming it. "I know what they are. I taught your mother, Harry. Both years she sat my exams. She sat them in a way that made me wonder what she'd become." She paused. "I know now. I know what she became." "You knew about the covenant," Harry said. "No, not until I saw the rings last night. Lily would not have told me. The unnamed associate would have had reasons for secrecy, and Lily would have honored those reasons." She looked at him directly. "But I am telling you both now. I will not pretend I don't see what I see. Whatever you need from me, within what I'm permitted to give, you have it." "That's very," Hermione said. "Don't thank me," McGonagall said. "Be as extraordinary as your mother expected you to be. That's thanks enough." They left and walked for a moment in silence before, "She's going to watch us closely," Hermione said. "Yes," Harry said. "I find that reassuring rather than uncomfortable." "So do I." The first months at Hogwarts developed a rhythm that was different from the cottages. The cottage had been theirs entirely, organized around their pace and their questions. Hogwarts was organized around everyone's pace simultaneously, which meant there were days when the work was too slow, and days when they encountered something they hadn't anticipated. The binding's accelerant effect showed up in Defense Against the Dark Arts in October. They had been working through a chapter on shield charms. The theory was familiar to both of them from the cottage's curriculum, but the practical application in the classroom was different with other people present, other magical signatures in the space. When they practiced the shield charm together, not casting at each other, simply casting simultaneously in the same direction, the resulting shield was measurably larger and significantly more stable than either produced alone. Quirrell, who was teaching defense that year, looked at it for a long time. Hermione wrote in her notebook that evening, "The binding's accelerant effect appears to extend to simultaneous casting, not shared power, amplified resonance. Two instruments playing the same note don't double the volume. They create a third thing. We should test the limits systematically." They did. By December, they had mapped the effect well enough to understand its constraints. It required genuine alignment of intent, not just simultaneous action. If either of them was uncertain about what they were doing, the amplification didn't activate. It wasn't about coordination, it was about meaning the same thing at the same time. This struck Harry as something that would be very hard to fake, which seemed deliberate. The potions classroom in the dungeons was cold in a way that wasn't accidental. Hermione had explained on the train that Snape had requested these rooms when appointed, and maintained the request for 12 years. The environment was a pedagogical choice. The discomfort required attention. Snape entered and looked at Harry, or rather, he looked at Harry's hand, then Hermione's. A glance lasting 2 seconds that contained 10 years of waiting, compressed into a motion most people would have blinked through. Harry had never encountered someone who could deliver that much information in that small a gesture. The speech about bottling fame and brewing glory came with the spare precision of something refined through practice, each sentence doing one job, then the next sentence doing the next. No waste. Harry recognized it from the supplement's passing description of Snape's classroom approach. Hearing it in person was different. The voice was cold, and underneath the cold there was something that cared about the subject too much to be careless. Snape stopped at Harry's desk. "Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" The room's attention gathered itself. The draught of living death, one of the most powerful sleeping potions known. Asphodel's alkaloid compounds interact with wormwood's volatile oils to produce a sustained narcotic effect. The ratio determines whether the sleep lasts hours or indefinitely. The Riverside Method's 1743 revision recommends crushing the saprophoros bean rather than cutting it for better juice yield and improved stability, Harry said. Silence. Where would I look if I needed a bezoar? The stomach of a goat, a calcified mass that forms in the digestive tract. Calcium phosphate binds to most toxic compounds before absorption. Standard antidote for most poisoning cases, though it won't work on potions specifically designed to circumvent the mechanism. The silence changed character. "What is the difference," Snape said quietly, "between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "There isn't one. Both are names for aconitum, also called aconite. The name used in a given recipe reflects regional tradition, monkshood in Central European sources, wolfsbane in Northern European ones. The same plant, developed independently across traditions before standardization created a unified nomenclature." Snape looked at Harry for a long moment. "It seems," he said, "fame isn't everything." He moved on. Beside Harry, Hermione wrote without looking up. "The Riverside Method citation. He'll know where we spent the summer." "I know. That's the point," Harry said. Harry went to Snape alone on an evening 2 weeks into term. Hermione had argued for going together, reasonably and logically, in the organized way she argued everything. Harry had said, the supplement described Snape's grief, and the grief was connected to his mother, and some conversations needed to begin between two people before they could include a third. She looked at him for a moment. updated something in her assessment. Sound reasoning? I'll be in the library. The potions classroom after hours was simply itself. The ingredient shelves, the oil lamps, the organization that made more sense once the people who hadn't learned it yet were gone. Snape was at his desk. He looked up. His expression wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. Potter. Professor, may I come in? A decision being made. Yes. Harry stood at a distance that said, "This is a conversation between two people who intend to be honest." "The covenant activated," he said, "the morning of my birthday. At Gringotts. I know. I was notified the following day." Snape set down his quill. "I didn't know when it would activate, only that it would. Your name is in the supporting documentation. As the unnamed associate, the letter told you to ask." "Yes." Harry paused. "We finished the supplement. The journal's first 200 pages by the 6th of August, the supplement in full by the 20th. The Granger girl read the analytical sections 3 times and produced a cross-reference index organized by subject and temporal sequence. She said the author's logic was sound, but occasionally omitted intermediate steps in a way that suggested someone accustomed to thinking faster than they wrote. She wasn't wrong, Snape said. No. She also said it reminded her of someone who had spent years actually understanding a thing, rather than explaining it to people who hadn't yet caught up. A pause. "She sounds like Lily," Snape said. "I've been told I have my mother's eyes," Harry said. "You have her eyes." He looked at the desk rather than at Harry. "You have your father's face. The combination is—" He stopped. 10 years of careful management made some things easier, and not all things. "Disorienting. I'm sorry. For what it costs you, seeing me," Harry said. "You have nothing to apologize for, no, but I'm offering it anyway." He paused. "I know what you were to her, not the specifics, the shape. The supplement made the shape clear. You worked with her for a year to build the covenant. You had to rebuild something first that had been broken. She made you prove your sincerity before she trusted you in." Snape was very still. "The potions room in the annex," Harry said. "Ingredient storage organized by function and interaction principle, by what things do to each other when they meet. Someone designed that room who found the logic itself beautiful. Someone who thought about potions as systematic transformation rather than a set of steps. I recognized it in the supplements section on the discipline." He met Snape's eyes. "That room was yours." A long silence. "What do you want, Potter?" "An honest relationship. You knew my mother. You co-built the covenant. You've been updating the supplement for a decade because you made an agreement, and you've been keeping it." Harry held his gaze. "I'd rather we said all of that plainly than performed a version of something we're not." "And in my classroom?" "In my classroom, you're my potions professor. Assess my work accurately. If it's good, say so, because accurate feedback is more useful than performed severity. If it isn't good, say that too." "Your mother would have said that differently," Snape said. "How?" "She would have said, 'Sev, if you give me bad marks because you hate me, I'll come back and haunt you.' She said it the way you handled something that needed to be handled carefully." "Which was often. Did it work?" "Usually." Something in his voice changed. 1 degree from cold toward the thing adjacent to warmth. "She was very difficult to be difficult around." "I'll take that as a description of something worth working toward," Harry said. "Don't." The word came out sharper than he seemed to intend. "You are not her. Attempting to be her would be unkind to both of us. Be yourself. That seems achievable." Harry moved toward the door. Stopped. "The supplements, additions, the soul vessels. How many are you certain of?" "Not tonight. The terms are established. We demonstrate them in practice. Come to my next class. With the same preparation as today, we proceed from there." At the door, "Potter, Professor, the cross-reference index. I would like to see it." "I'll ask her. She understated herself," Snape said. "I wrote her at age 2, so the understatement was perhaps forgivable. Your mother would have liked her very much." He looked at the desk. "She chose specifically, not a category. Hermione Granger specifically. Some things I understood only after the fact. I keep thinking about that," Harry said. "What it means that she knew." "Yes," Snape said. "So do I." Near the midpoint of their second year at Hogwarts, the writing appeared on the second-floor corridor wall overnight. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware." Mrs. Norris hung rigid beneath it. "Not dead. the distinction immediately apparent to Harry, who had read enough at the cottage to know the difference. He stood in the corridor for 30 seconds, then went to find Hermione. She was in the annex, not Thornfield, which wasn't accessible from Hogwarts directly, but a room they'd found in October of first year through the binding's sensitivity to old magic in the castle. No label on any map they'd found. Accessible only to them, bookshelves that organized themselves to their research needs, a table, the atmosphere of a covenant space that had been waiting for someone to use it properly. She looked up when he came in. The second floor. Mrs. Norris. Petrified, not dead. I felt the shift around 3 this morning. Something changed in the castle's magical environment. 4 books were open in front of her, her 3rd notebook of the year half filled already. Most likely mechanism, a basilisk. Killing gaze through indirect reflection explains petrification rather than death. The voice you've been hearing in the pipes since September. Parseltongue, Harry said. A serpent moving through the plumbing. The binding registers it differently from standard magical sounds. There's a directional component, a living quality. She closed one book and opened another. Someone is directing the basilisk through an object, something that carries the intent of a Parseltongue speaker without requiring that speaker to be present. She paused. Ginny Weasley has had something with her since September, something the binding registers as old and wrong in the way the supplement described a soul vessel. I've been watching the pattern for 2 months. Ron, sitting in the corner with a chess problem, went very still. Ginny, he said, she didn't do anything intentionally. Hermione said immediately, I want that established before anything else. What is it? A diary, I think. Something she's been writing in. The binding registers it as actively wrong, not just dark. She met Ron's eyes directly. I need to talk to her alone. Ron set down his chess problem. Go. Hermione came back 20 minutes later and set a small black diary on the table. She gave it to me. What did you tell her? Harry said. The truth. That she seemed exhausted and was having memory gaps. That something might have been done to her magically without her knowledge and it was not her fault. She looked at the diary. She cried. She said it had been understanding her, better than anyone had. And then it had started asking her to do things she didn't remember doing. She'd been frightened but didn't know how to ask for help. A pause. She thought it was in her head. Ron said quietly, It wasn't in her head. No. Hermione set her hand near the diary without touching it. The binding's registration of this is stronger than anything else I've encountered. It's a soul vessel, the kind the supplement's section 14 describes. A constructed receptacle for a fragment of consciousness. She looked at Harry. If he made one, he made others. This is what the supplement's editions warned us about. We need to destroy it, and then talk to Snape, Harry said. Basilisk venom would work, but not taken without asking. She held his gaze. The supplement's framework on magical creatures. Compelling a being capable of understanding a request is always worse than asking, because compelled cooperation is unstable. We go to the chamber and we ask. Ron considered this. All right, I'll stay here in case it goes badly and you need someone to come looking. Very practical, Hermione said. I try, Ron said, and went back to his chess problem. Go ask your basilisk. Nearly headless Nick was in the hospital wing, his ghostly form stilled in a way that was deeply unsettling. He could speak, though with effort. I saw it in the armor. The reflection in a breastplate, he paused. Enormous. The largest living thing I've encountered since the 16th century. Did you hear it before you saw the reflection? Harry said. Since September. In the pipes. Ghosts aren't prey. I didn't register it as a threat. He paused. I should have said something sooner. You didn't know what it was. I knew the sound, Nick said. Parseltongue. I heard it once in the 16th century, from a Slytherin student who could speak it. The sound in the pipes has the same quality, but it sounds preserved, recorded. The intent behind the words rather than the words themselves being spoken fresh. He looked at them, or at the space where they stood, his eyes not fully focusing. You two carry old magic, covenant rings. I saw them used once, in 1492. Very rare now. We know, Harry said. Whatever you're planning, be careful. The basilisk is not simply a weapon. It has been here a very long time. Moaning Myrtle, when they arrived in her bathroom past midnight, looked at them from her U-bend with the expression of a ghost who had organized her entire personality around the expectation of being avoided. Good evening, Hermione said. Nobody comes here unless they want something, Myrtle said. We're here to open the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. A long pause. You know about that? The person who opened it 50 years ago, Harry said. He looked like you. Dark hair, much less polite. She drifted. I saw the sink move, and then I was dead. I'm sorry that happened to you, Harry said. Myrtle looked at him with the expression of someone receiving genuine sympathy for the first time in a very long while. You mean it? She said. Yes, she looked at the sink. Open it then. It's been 50 years. Something should happen. The basilisk emerged from the shadows with the deliberateness of something that had decided to reveal itself rather than to attack, and its eyes were closed. Harry spoke in Parseltongue. The language arrived not through translation but directly, the way a native tongue arrived, immediate and already itself. I'm going to speak to you. I'm not going to command. The basilisk said, in the language of serpents, you speak the tongue of the founders. Yes, the last one who used it came through the pipes. He gave only commands, not words. I know the difference. Why are you here? Harry explained. The diary, what it was, what it had been used for, what they needed. A shed fang given willingly, not taken. And then he said something he hadn't planned, but which arrived as true. You've been directing attacks for someone who's been dead for decades, through an object made before you were made part of this. You didn't choose any of it. A long silence. I do not choose, the basilisk said. You chose not to attack when I entered the chamber. You heard me speaking and responded to the speech rather than to my presence as a threat. Another silence. I had not considered that a choice. You were used without being asked. We're asking. The basilisk moved to the base of a column. A long moment. When it raised its head, a shed fang lay on the wet stone floor. The thing that directed me, it said. Destroy it. We will, Harry said. And then, a pause unlike any Harry had experienced. The pause of a creature that had not been asked what it wanted in 1,000 years. What becomes of me? What do you want to become of you? I do not know, the basilisk said. I have not been asked. You don't have to know right now. The chamber is yours. We know how to get in. Harry looked at the fang in his hand. We can come back. Not to use you. To talk. You've been alone here for a very long time. That is a long time, the basilisk said. Yes. Come back, it said. Come back and speak to me. We will, Harry said. He meant it. The diary dissolved when the fang went through it, ink running black, then gray, then absent. Something that had been sustaining itself through continuous effort simply stopped. Myrtle, watching from her U-bend, said, What was that? Something that needed to end, Hermione said. Good. Then, after a pause with something different in it, less performance, more person. Are you coming back? To visit? Not to open things? Myrtle said. Yes, Harry said. She said, with a quality he had not heard from her before, something that had been dormant under decades of practiced melancholy. Good. That would be good. They went to Snape 2 days later. He looked at the destroyed diary. He looked at the documentation Hermione had assembled. He looked at both of them with the expression of someone receiving confirmation of a fear he had carried for a long time. The first one, he said. The first we're certain of, Hermione said. The supplement lists others. We need to know which ones you've confirmed. He opened a drawer and produced several pages of notation. The ring, Marvolo Gaunt's ring, which contains the resurrection stone and a killing curse woven into the metal. Do not approach it without the containment protocol I've been developing. He set the pages on the desk. A locket, a cup, a diadem I believe is somewhere in the school. The snake. He looked at them. 5 remaining, 6 including the diary. The prophecy, Harry said. Snape looked at him. It's in the journal. My mother wrote that you heard it delivered, that you brought it to Voldemort before you understood what he would do with it, that you've lived with that knowledge ever since. Harry held his gaze. She said the prophecy matters only because someone chose to believe it. The silence was the kind that came from something carried privately for a long time now, present in a room with other people. Your mother was the most perceptive person I ever knew, Snap said. I know. The prophecy speaks of a child born as the 7th month dies, to parents who defied Voldemort, who would have a power the Dark Lord knows not. Snape looked at the desk. For years I believed that power was something measurable, some magical ability he lacked. He paused. Your mother understood from the beginning what the power was. It wasn't something held in one person. He looked at both of them, at the rings, at what they'd just accomplished together. It was this: the willingness to choose each other, to build rather than only react, to ask instead of take. The prophecy was never about what one person could do alone. It was always about what two people could become. Third year brought the exoneration of Sirius Black. Hermione had been building toward it since their first week at Hogwarts, from the moment the Gringotts documentation named Sirius as a Covenant security contact, and she had cross-referenced that against his 12-year imprisonment without trial. The case had three components: the procedural failure documented in the Ministry's own records, the continued existence of Peter Pettigrew, and the Covenant's legal provision for challenging wrongful imprisonment when the imprisoned person was named in a Covenant holder's security network. Ron had been the one who handed over Scabbers. He held the rat in both hands long enough that nobody spoke, looking at something that had been his pet for 3 years, and was nothing of the kind. He had asked Hermione twice to be certain, and she had been certain, and he set the rat on the table and said, very quietly, "Do it." Pettigrew's transformation, revealed through the containment field Hermione had developed with Snape's technical framework, was followed by 40 minutes of Veritaserum testimony that left no ambiguity about what had happened on the night the Potters died, and in the street where 12 Muggles had lost their lives. At the Wisengamot hearing, held in early summer, Amelia Bones chaired the oversight committee with the careful attention of someone doing her job because the work itself mattered. She reviewed the Ministry's own records, she heard the testimony, she looked at Fudge with the patience of someone who had certainty and didn't need to perform it. "I don't see," she said, "how we proceed from here except in one direction. 3 votes to 4. Sirius Black, exonerated." In the corridor afterward, Sirius stood with the blinking quality of someone who had been surviving on a specific kind of endurance for 12 years and hadn't yet adjusted to its absence. He looked at Harry and said, "She did it. Yes." He closed his eyes for 1 second. "She told me the last year that she was working on something. Wouldn't tell me what. Said if it worked, it would be the most important thing she'd ever done." "She was right," Harry said. Hermione beside them said without looking up from her notes, "The Peverell Framework's standard provisions for Covenant security contacts include property access rights. I've confirmed the text. You can access the cottage, Sirius." He looked at her for a long moment, the look of someone who had heard about a person and was now meeting them and finding the description had been accurate but insufficient. "Harry told me you were good," he said. "Harry told me you were innocent," she said. "We were both right." He laughed, the first time Harry had heard that sound from him, unguarded and real and too long compressed. The laugh of someone who had remembered that laughing was something they could still do. The summer after Sirius's exoneration was the first summer Harry spent entirely at the cottage, with Sirius in residence and no Dursleys anywhere on the horizon. Sirius had been living at Grimmauld Place, dealing with the Order's remnants and the state of a house that had spent 12 years without anyone to care about it. He came to the cottage for the 3rd week of July, and stayed through the end of August, which was how it became clear that the cottage responded to him the way it responded to all people named in the Covenant's security documentation. It was warmer when he was in it, the maintenance charms more attentive, as if the house recognized someone it had been expecting. He and Harry spent mornings in the cottage's practice space, working through dueling techniques that Snape had outlined in the supplement's appendix, but described as requiring experienced in-person instruction. Sirius had been an excellent duelist before Azkaban and remained one, though he tired faster than he once had, and was honest about this rather than pretending otherwise. Hermione spent those mornings in the library, working through the supplement's remaining analytical sections and producing a systematic cross-reference of the soul vessel information against everything the Covenant Library held on magical theory. By the end of July, she had a document that Snape, when he saw it in August, looked at for a very long time. "You connected the soul vessel mechanism to the mortality theory in Flamel's papers," he said. "They're describing the same phenomenon from different directions. Flamel was trying to extend life. Voldemort was trying to eliminate death entirely. The magical mechanics overlap significantly," Hermione said. "No one has made that connection in print," Snape said. "I know. I checked," she said. He looked at her. "You should write this. Eventually, when it's safe to put it in print," she said. "After," he said. "Yes, after," she said. Snape came 3 times that August. Each visit developed a pattern. He worked with Harry in the potions room in the mornings, covering advanced theory that was not on any curriculum Harry would officially study for 2 more years. In the afternoons, he worked with Hermione on the cross-reference document, arguing with her about methodology and revising the conclusions they were both wrong about, which was both of them in different places, and neither of them very often. Sirius sat in the sitting room during these sessions and read, occasionally calling through the open door that they'd been going for 3 hours, and the food was getting cold. On the last evening of August, when the cottage was quieter than it had been in weeks, Harry stood in the east garden and looked at the old apple tree and thought about a stone buried at its roots that he'd chosen not to use. The choice sat comfortably in him, not as loss or denial, but as a thing that had been right. Some things were right before you could fully explain why, and the explanation arrived later. Hermione came out and stood beside him. "Ready for 4th year," she said. "It wasn't a question, are we ever not ready?" he said. "We've been not ready for things before. We've just been prepared enough that it didn't matter." He thought about this. That seems like the right approach. Your mother thought so too. She looked at the tree, the ring she left, the cottage, the journal, the supplement. She didn't try to guarantee the outcome. She tried to make us capable of handling whatever the outcome turned out to be. She built people, not a plan, he said. Yes, exactly that. She paused. I think about that a lot. What it says about what she understood, about what protection actually means, Hermione said. What does it mean? That the most useful thing you can give someone isn't safety, it's capability, the ability to handle whatever comes. She looked at him. She gave us each other, and then she trusted us to do the rest. That's a lot of trust for 2 people who'd never met, he said. She knew what she was looking for, she said. They stayed there in the late summer evening until the light changed, and then went in for dinner, which Sirius had made in his characteristically determined way. Not a natural cook, but someone who had decided to learn and was getting better at it, one failed attempt at a time. 4th year brought the Triwizard Tournament. Harry and Hermione had been reading the original tournament charter since July. Hermione had set her hand on the annex bookshelf and thought clearly about what they needed, and the shelf had produced 4 texts, one of which was the founding document that predated the ministry and operated under its own authority accordingly. Section 14, Provisions for Non-Standard Entries, Sovereign Bodies. Registered covenants under frameworks that predated the tournament's establishment. The Peverell Covenant predated the tournament by 2 centuries. Hermione had said, when she found it, "We can enter as our own institution." She set the charter on the table. The binding's registration of Moody has been wrong since September. Same pattern as other dark adjacent magic we've encountered. Something present that doesn't belong there. Someone is using the tournament to get to you, and they've had the plan in place for months. If we control our participation, we control the terms. We've been choosing the terms since that first morning at Gringotts, Harry said. Yes, and it has worked. She held his gaze. We don't stop now. The submission went into the goblet's flame the evening before the selection. The fire changed for exactly 1 second, not hotter but more present, the color of something very old recognizing something that belonged to its own category. Then it returned to its standard blue-white. The following evening at dinner, after Victor Crumb, Fleur Delacour, and Cedric Diggory were named, the goblet produced a 4th piece of parchment. Dumbledore caught it. Read it. His expression moved through something fast and private. A very intelligent person encountering information he didn't have and rapidly assessing its implications. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, Covenant Entry, Peverell Framework, he said. The Great Hall produced the sound of 200 people receiving unexpected information simultaneously. In the anteroom afterward, Cedric Diggory stood to the side and looked at Harry and Hermione with the careful attention of someone re-evaluating what he thought he'd understood. You planned this from the start of the year, he said. From July, Hermione said. And Moody. Isn't Moody, whoever is teaching defense, is someone else occupying his body? We've known since September. We've been building evidence before acting, because acting on strong suspicion, with insufficient proof, gives the wrong person the chance to counter it, Harry said. Cedric processed this with the thoughtfulness of someone accustomed to evaluating information before deciding what it meant. The first task. You know what it is, he said. Dragons, 1 each. They're protective rather than aggressive. Guarding eggs, not guarding territory. Approach matters more than capability. She looked at him. If you want to talk through strategy, we're willing, Hermione said. Why would you help me? Because you're not who we're competing against, Harry said. Cedric was quiet. Then, simply, Then I want to help too. Hermione opened her notebook. Neville Longbottom had been watching the false Moody since the start of term, with an expression Harry finally recognized as recognition rather than awe. Neville's parents were in St. Mungo's. He knew what the people who served Voldemort were capable of, and had been watching their consequences his entire life. He had been watching Crouch Jr., and knowing something was wrong without having a framework to name it. Harry gave him the framework. Luna Lovegood, who sat with Neville at meals and had been tracking the false Moody through entirely different methods, provided corroborating observation when Harry and Hermione brought both of them into confidence in late autumn. "He's been dreaming the same loop for months," Luna said, looking up from what appeared to be an upside-down magazine. The Raxperts around him had been confused since the start of term. They can't settle on where he actually is. She looked at Harry and Hermione with a directness that had nothing defensive in it. "I thought someone would notice eventually." "You noticed," Hermione said. "I notice most things. People don't usually ask." "We're asking now," Harry said. Luna looked at the rings. She looked at them both with a clarity that had nothing guarded about it. "All right," she said, with the simplicity of someone for whom this kind of decision was uncomplicated. "I'll help." Together, the five of them assembled a case that Dumbledore, when presented with it in March, accepted without flinching. "You've been building this since September," he said. "We observed until we had certainty. Strong suspicion and incomplete evidence would have given him the opportunity to counter it," Hermione said. Dumbledore looked at all five of them, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Luna, and something in his expression settled into a new configuration. "Your mother built wisely, Harry," he said. "She built the foundation. We did the rest," Harry said. The year that followed the tournament's conclusion was the year the Ministry decided that Voldemort had not returned. This was not a surprise. Hermione had been modeling Ministry behavior since second year, and had given the refusal to acknowledge outcome better than 70% odds. She had also been modeling what that refusal would cost, in preparation time, in public readiness, in the particular damage that official disbelief does to the people who know the truth and are told they're lying. What she had not fully modeled was how isolating it would feel. The Covenant's legal standing insulated Harry and Hermione from certain pressures. The Ministry could not compel them in ways it could compel someone without that protection, and they knew it. But it couldn't insulate them from the Hogwarts educational decrees, from Umbridge, from the specific ugliness of someone with institutional authority deciding that the truth was inconvenient, and proceeding accordingly. Umbridge was the first person in 5 years who made the binding's protective resonance activate without a specific magical attack. The wrongness it registered in her was not the wrongness of a dark object or an occupied body. It was the wrongness of someone who had organized their entire moral architecture around obedience to whoever currently held power, with no underlying principle below that except the pleasure of enforcement. Hermione said after Umbridge's first class, "The binding doesn't usually register people." "I know," Harry said. "She's not using dark magic. She's not occupied. She's just wrong," Harry said. "The binding registers wrong." Hermione was quiet for a moment. "That's a useful calibration to have. They did not organize Dumbledore's army as a rebellion. They organized it as a preparation. The same logic that had governed everything since the cottage. People who understood how to defend themselves were people who could not be paralyzed by an institution telling them the threat wasn't real. They could believe what they knew regardless of what they were officially being told." Neville's development across that year was something Harry watched with particular attention. He came into the DA's first session, already knowing more than most of the fifth years. He had, it turned out, been practicing quietly on his own since second year, going to the library at night and working through what he could access. He hadn't shared this because nobody had asked. When Harry asked, he said, "I kept thinking my parents were tortured by people who served Voldemort. It seemed like the least I could do was learn how to fight them." Luna attended every session and defended herself so effectively at the end of the year, at the Ministry, that the Death Eaters she faced looked briefly uncertain about how to proceed, which was not a common response to Luna Lovegood that most people would have predicted. Sirius went anyway. He came back. He came back different, and Harry didn't ask about the hand, and Sirius didn't explain it, and they sat in the cottage that evening and didn't talk for a long time. "I know," Harry said. "I would have run straight in. I know. That's why I told Dumbledore instead of telling you first." Sirius looked at him for a long moment. "Your mother would have done exactly the same thing." "I hope so," Harry said. "She did," Sirius said. "More than once. She told me afterward instead of before, every time. He paused. I hated it every time. And every time she was right. The ring Horcrux was destroyed in April of their 6th year. Hermione had spent 3 months working with Snape on the containment protocol. Weekends at the cottage's potions room, in the space Snape had designed years ago for exactly this kind of work. The ring was Marvolo Gaunt's ring, set with the Resurrection Stone, the second of the Deathly Hallows, and carried a killing curse woven into its metal designed to destroy whoever handled it without understanding what they touched. Hermione had sat Harry down when the identification was confirmed. "The stone can't be destroyed with the soul vessel," she said, "but there's a secondary reason to separate them." She paused, which she rarely did. "Your mother would have had an opinion about what the Resurrection Stone was for, about whether it should ever be used. What do you think her opinion would have been?" Harry said. "That the dead are not tools, that what she left you was in the covenant and the cottage and the journal, and that should be enough. That calling the dead back is the kind of thing someone does when they don't trust what was already given." She held his gaze. "Do you disagree?" He thought about it for a long time. "No," he said, "but I'd like to hold it once." "That seems reasonable," she said. The stone was separated first. Harry held it alone in the cottage's sitting room for 1 minute. He didn't summon anyone. It was enough to know he could have. It was enough to know that what his mother had left him was already everything she had to give, and that it had been enough to build an entire life on. He gave the stone back to Hermione. "Put it somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere it won't be found or used." She buried it in the east garden at Thornfield, under the old apple tree that the Covenant's maintenance charms had been tending for 15 years. The ground received it the way it received anything the cottage's system considered part of itself. Easily, naturally, as if it had always been meant to rest there. The locket fell to Sirius, who tracked its location through the remnant network of the Old Order of the Phoenix, people who remembered Voldemort's first reign and were willing to move against the prospect of a second. He brought it to the cottage, and set it on the table with the careful respect of someone who had handled dark objects before, and knew what they could do. The cup required access to Bellatrix Lestrange's vault at Gringotts. Grifhook heard the request, and was quiet for a long moment. This would require something that could be considered a significant transgression against goblin banking practices. "What would you require in exchange?" Hermione said. The negotiation took 4 hours. What was agreed upon has never been fully disclosed, but goblin-wizard relations improved measurably in the years following Voldemort's defeat. And reform legislation that Hermione later drafted bore language matching Grifhook's known priorities with unusual precision. Neville found the diadem. He had been spending time in the Room of Requirement since 5th year and had stumbled into one configuration that made the air feel wrong in a way he now recognized. The same wrongness Harry and Hermione had been documenting across 4 years. He came to them with coordinates and a description, quiet and certain in the way he had become over time. Someone who had walked toward frightening things, often enough that the fear was still present, but no longer stopped him. Luna came with them to retrieve it, and stood in the Room of Requirement while Harry lifted the diadem from its resting place, and Hermione destroyed it with basilisk venom. The basilisk had been contributing a small supply of collected venom across their visits to the chamber, offered freely, part of the working arrangement built on the founding principle, asking rather than taking. Luna said, watching the diadem dissolve, "Things that have been split apart are always unhappy. Better now. Much better." Ron's contribution across all of this was harder to name, but no less essential. He was present at every decision that mattered. He drove to safe houses at 2 a.m. When Sirius needed backup, he sat with Neville after the Room of Requirement when Neville didn't want to talk about it, and just stayed there until Neville didn't need someone to stay anymore. He had decided, 3 years ago on a train, that these were his people, and nothing that had happened since had made him reconsider at once. Nagini was last. Harry had thought about her since the end of 4th year, since the vision through Voldemort's eyes in the Ministry corridor, the parseltongue in his head that wasn't his own voice. He had told Hermione the morning after, "There's a snake. She's close to him. The connection goes through her sometimes." Hermione had said, "The binding registered the vision differently from the others. More alive. She's a soul vessel, but she's also herself. Those are 2 separate things. Can we separate them?" That's what I've been reading about since that morning. Voldemort returned in early 1996 through a modified ritual that did not use Harry's blood, Their interference with the tournament's final task had prevented the original plan. He came back in a body, but the body was not anchored. It was sustained by will rather than by the permanence the original ritual would have provided. An unanchored return, Hermione said, when Snape confirmed it, more vulnerable than what he intended. Our interference with the tournament produced a less stable version of his plan. She looked at Harry. He's still Voldemort, but we bought something. Time, Harry said. And terms, she said. We still set the terms. The final confrontation arrived in May of the following year. Not a battle they walked into unprepared, a confrontation they had been building toward for 6 years. Dumbledore met them at the entrance. I had hoped for more time, he said. The timeline compressed, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at them both with the expression of a man who had spent 7 years watching something he had underestimated when it began. The snake, he said. We know, Hermione said. We've been preparing the approach since 4th year. You're going to ask her, Dumbledore said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I have made decisions I believed were correct. Withholding the full picture from you, allowing you to move through this without all the information, believing I was protecting you, was not correct. I was making your choices for you. I am sorry. I know. We'll have the full version of that conversation after tonight, Harry said. After tonight, then? Dumbledore said. He stepped aside. Nagini was coiled in the Great Hall, separate from the Death Eaters in the upper corridors, present because she had been directed there rather than because she had chosen it. Harry spoke in Parseltongue. There are 2 of you, she said. Yes, she doesn't speak the language, but she's here with me. You are different from him. Yes, he speaks the tongue as ownership, as orders given to things he possessed. You speak it as addressing someone. I'm going to tell you something. You are going to tell me what I carry. You already know, Harry said. I have known since it was put in me, Nagini said. He used a murder to come back partway some years ago. He placed the fragment in me then. I did not choose. Several years is long enough to carry something that is not yours. Her voice was level, the voice of a river that had been running in one direction so long that the direction had simply become what it was. What do you want? We can remove it, Harry said. We've done this before. What was added can be separated from what was already there. What was already there, she said. You. Whatever you were before he made you carry this. Silence. He will feel it when you remove it, she said. He will be diminished. Yes. Do I want him to be diminished? She said it not as a question, but as something she was turning over, examining from all sides, holding up to whatever light she had access to. I do not like what I have been made to do. Then I think that's your answer, Harry said. After a long silence, remove it. Hermione's methodology, refined across 6 previous applications, adjusted for a living being, the bindings combined attunement to dark objects, and living magical creatures, giving her a precision no other approach could have offered. Took 20 minutes. The fragment separated. Nagini was still. Then she moved, toward the hall's great doors open to the night outside. She moved differently than she had entered. Lighter, not in weight but in intention, the movement of something that had put down what it had been carrying and remembered what it felt like not to carry it. At the door she paused. She said without turning, "The Parselmouth. His whole life he thought of you as his connection, his extension." "Yes," Harry said, "you were always only yourself." She went through the door and didn't look back. Hermione found Harry's hand in the darkness. "He has nothing left," she said. "No. Whatever comes through those doors comes as something mortal. He chose every fragmentation, chose taking over asking, fear over love, breaking over building. And the sum of those choices is what's left." She looked at the doors. "We did most things right." "Most things," Harry said. "We'll fix the rest after." When Voldemort entered the Great Hall, they were not standing alone. Ron was there, steady and certain, the person who had decided who his people were and what that meant, and had not reconsidered it once in 6 years. Neville stood beside him, someone who had walked toward frightening things long enough that the things had stopped being able to paralyze him. Luna, who had been seeing clearly all along, and had simply needed someone to ask. Cedric, who had chosen to be trustworthy when other options were available, and had made that choice repeatedly, across 4 years, in small ways and large ones. Sirius, who had survived 12 years of injustice and come back into the world anyway, rebuilt himself piece by piece into someone who could still laugh. And Snape, somewhere in the castle, who had kept faith with two people for 17 years and had seen it become this moment. The years that followed had the texture of work done well, difficult, specific, and satisfying in proportion to its difficulty. Hermione rebuilt the Ministry's framework from the foundational documents outward: the Peverell Charter, the Covenant Law, the Wisengamot precedents she had been studying since she was 11 years old, into something that couldn't be as easily turned against the people it was supposed to serve. The reform took 4 years and 3 direct challenges from people who had preferred the previous arrangement. She addressed each challenge with the same approach she had applied to everything: thorough preparation and a refusal to mistake confidence for certainty. Harry reformed the Aurora Division around the principles that had guided everything they'd done: evidence before action, asking rather than compelling, authority earned through trustworthiness rather than assumed through position. He recruited Neville as a consultant on creature welfare, Luna as an advisor on overlooked intelligence, and Cedric to lead the legal review that had been needed for decades and never done. Kingsley Shacklebolt, running the Ministry in the immediate aftermath, said in their first meeting that Harry seemed to have been thinking about these reforms for a long time. Harry said since he was 11, Kingsley said that explained quite a lot. Sirius built a life. This was not a small thing. It was, in fact, enormously difficult, and he would have said so if asked. 12 years in Azkaban leaves absences where presence should be. He filled them slowly and deliberately, the way you restored something damaged, carefully accepting that some things wouldn't return to exactly their prior form, and choosing to value what remained. He and Remus rebuilt their friendship across 2 years of careful honesty about lost time and wrong assumptions. They came to the cottage for significant occasions and stayed longer than they planned each time, which was how the cottage seemed to operate on people. It was built for return. Neville became the herbology professor at Hogwarts, which surprised people who hadn't known him well, and surprised nobody who had. Luna spent a decade documenting magical creatures through methods initially dismissed as eccentric and eventually adopted as standard. She had, as it turned out, simply been paying attention to things other people had agreed to stop seeing. Cedric became a magical lawyer who was known for being both skilled and honest, which was rarer than it should have been. Ron went into magical games and sports, then ministry reform, then into whatever needed doing next. He was, across all of it, exactly the same person he had been on the Hogwarts Express at 11, someone who decided who his people were and showed up. Myrtle's bathroom was no longer avoided. She had 2 regular visitors and had developed, over years of being treated as a person, the cautious personality of someone starting to believe it might be true. She had opinions about the Quidditch season and expressed them without apology. The Basilisk received visitors twice yearly and had formed what it tentatively identified as preferences. Chief among them, continued conversation, and to be addressed by the name it had given itself in Parseltongue, which translated to something approximately meaning, the one who chose. Snape retired from Hogwarts in the year that curriculum reform made it possible to teach potions, as he had always believed it should be taught, as a discipline, not a series of steps, as transformation, not recipe following. He lived in the south of England in a house with a garden he tended with genuine attention. He came to the cottage's annual gathering without exception and spent most of each visit in extended argument with Hermione about methodology, which she found invigorating, and he found the closest available approximation of adequate intellectual company. He had taken on 3 apprentices in the old tradition. One dedicated her published methodology to him. He kept the book on a shelf where he could see it from his desk. Ginny Weasley had spent the years after the war doing the work of someone who had been used as a weapon and knew it, and refused to let that be the end of the story. She played Quidditch professionally for 7 years, with a ferocity that made sense to anyone who knew her history, and perhaps didn't to anyone who didn't. She came to the cottage occasionally in the early years, always with Ron, and she and Hermione had a friendship that was careful at first, and then became less careful as time passed. And the thing that had been done to her with the diary receded further into the past, without disappearing from it. She had been not guilty from the beginning. It had taken her longer than everyone else to believe it. In the 3rd year after the war, she and Harry had a conversation in the cottage's sitting room that took 2 hours and covered a great deal of territory and ended with her saying, "I'm glad she chose you both. I'm glad it worked." And Harry saying, "I'm glad you gave Hermione the diary," and her laughing, a short, surprised sound, and saying, That's not how I think about it. And Harry saying, I know, but it's what happened. You trusted her with it. You let go of it. She thought about it. I suppose I did. That was courage, he said. Not the fighting kind. The other kind. She looked at the ring on his hand. Your mother built something that required two people to be genuinely willing. What are the odds that she found two people like that? She knew what she was looking for, he said. Yes, she always did, Ginny said. The cottage itself, across the years, became a center of gravity for a loose collection of people who returned to it regularly, not just for the annual gathering. For the ordinary reasons people returned to places where significant things had happened, and where the people they needed were. Sirius came and went freely, treating it as a second home, and not bothering to pretend otherwise. Neville came in autumn, when the garden was doing interesting things, and he wanted to observe the maintenance charm's interaction with natural growth cycles. Luna came when she was between expeditions, and needed somewhere quiet to write up her findings. Cedric came for the library, specifically for the legal texts in the Covenant section that he found nowhere else. Snape's annual visits acquired a particular quality over time, less formal, more honest about what they were. A man who had kept a promise for 17 years returning to see how the promise had turned out. He didn't speak about this directly. He spoke about methodology and current research and the apprentice's progress and the inadequate standards of published potions work. But he came every year without exception, and the cottage's maintenance charms were warmer when he was in it, and Harry noticed and said nothing, because some things communicated themselves better in the doing. On the 1st of September, 16 years after the Covenant activated, Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 and watched his son look at the Hogwarts Express. James Potter was 11 years old. He had the look of someone who had been preparing for this morning not with anxiety, but with intention. He had read Hogwarts, a history 3 times, worked through the first year of his grandmother's curriculum guide across the summer, and asked Hermione to explain the Covenant's educational methodology, which she had done across 4 hours over 3 evenings. And he had taken notes in a notebook that was, she confirmed privately to Harry, better organized than hers had been at his age. He wore a ring, new, made by Sirius the previous summer, set with the same deep-water stone. Not a binding. James wasn't a Covenant holder. That was his to choose, if he ever chose it. But the ring registered the Covenant's presence and proximity, and that was its purpose. Not power, but memory. Not magic, but knowledge of where the magic had come from. Harry had given it to him in July. Your grandmother made the originals, he'd said. This one is yours. It doesn't bind you to anything except the knowledge of what your family is. James had put it on immediately. I know what my family is. Tell me. James had taken a moment. Actually thought about it. The pause of someone reaching for precision rather than the nearest available phrasing. People who ask instead of take, he said. People who build things that last because they built them right. With other people. Deliberately. People who tell their friends the truth, even when it's complicated. He paused again. People who come back when they say they will. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said. That's exactly it. Sirius was at the far end of the platform with Remus, both of them watching the organized departure with the comfortable ease of people who had learned to be present in the world, and found it worth being present in. Sirius caught Harry's eye across the distance. He made the gesture that had developed between them across the years for moments like this. Not a wave, not formal acknowledgement. Something quieter. The motion of someone saying, I see you. This is extraordinary. We don't need words for it. Harry made it back. Hermione was at the train's door with Rose, who was 14 and in Ravenclaw and had inherited her mother's intensity and her father's instinct for when someone needed to be listened to rather than answered. She was explaining compartment selection to James with the patient authority of someone who had made this journey several times and had strong opinions about it. James was listening, actually listening, not waiting for his turn to speak. Ron appeared at Harry's elbow with a cup of tea produced from somewhere, because Ron had an uncanny talent for locating tea in proximity to any significant moment. He's ready, Ron said. He's been ready since June. Hermione's going to cry when the train leaves. Not on the platform, Harry said. In the car, Ron said. Yes, in the car. The whistle sounded. Rose squeezed James's arm and went back into the train. James turned. He looked at Harry and Hermione with the particular attention he brought to things he wanted to genuinely retain. Not photographically, but actually, the looking that keeps meaning rather than just detail. His grandmother's eyes, his grandfather's forehead, something entirely his own in the way he was standing. "The supplement. The last section," he said. "What about it?" Harry said. "I memorized it. Factual, simple. Professor Snape wrote, 'The highest purpose of any protective structure is to make itself unnecessary. The covenant succeeds completely when the conditions that required it no longer exist, and the people it protected can live in those conditions freely.'" He looked at his ring. "You did that. You made the covenant unnecessary. We started it. There's more to do," Hermione said. "I know," James said. "There's always more to do." He picked up his bag. "You thought 12 moves ahead, like grandmother. I'm going for 13. He boarded the train. The platform emptied in the particular way of places organized around one event, that once the event occurs, return immediately to being themselves. Harry and Hermione stood at its edge in the September morning while the express built toward departure. 13, she said. He said it without prompting. He said, "He's been planning it since June." She pulled out her notebook. Old habit, immediate reflex, as natural as breathing. The Bindings documentation series. I want to make it publicly accessible. Everything we learned, the methodology, the ethical framework, the legal instruments, available to anyone who needs it, so that the next person trying to protect someone they love doesn't have to start from nothing, doesn't have to be exceptional or lucky or connected to a covenant that someone else built for them. Anyone should be able to build what we built. "That's a significant project," he said. 2 years, maybe 3, she wrote something. Then she stopped. "Hermione," she looked up. "James is on the train," he said. "I know. The project can start tomorrow," he said. She looked at the notebook. She looked at him. She put the notebook away. "What do you want to do today?" she said. "The cottage. The East Garden has been doing something with the apple tree since August. I want to see how it's resolved. I noticed it in July. The maintenance charms have been incorporating the tree's own growth patterns into the design rather than overriding them. The result is technically unintentional, but..." She paused. "It's beautiful. I've been documenting it," she said. "Of course you have," he said. "I document things. It's who I am," she said. "I know," he said. He held out his hand. She set hers in it, not grasping, not reaching, placing it there, present. The motion of someone who was in the same moment, and had been in the same moment with him since the morning they were both 11 years old, and sat across from each other in a chamber, below a bank, and something old and carefully made recognized that its long wait was finally over. The rings were warm. They had been warmer once, the heat of something new activating, a structure long held in readiness finally put to use. Now, the warmth was different, steadier, quieter. The warmth of something that had found its full depth and was no longer burning toward it, but simply being it. His mother had understood this was possible. She had built for it, not for a version of events where she survived to see it, but for a version where what she loved continued past her. She had thought 12 moves ahead, and trusted that the people she built it for would be worth trusting. They had tried to be. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.